What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for episode, can you believe this? This is 16?
16.
Holy buckets. We should be having a party or something.
Well, we're going to be talking about a party today.
But who is the other guy talking? That is the good Dr. JD Mass. And I am Kory May. We are back for episode 16 of Same Difference Podcast. JD, how you been, good sir?
Been pretty well. How are you?
At the time of this taping, the Kansas City Chiefs are undisputed world champions in professional football.
Professional American football for those listening overseas.
You are correct. I would imagine that there's some parties going on in St. Louis. There's some parties that were going on in Las Vegas, and definitely some partying going on in Kansas City as well. What did you think about that game? Was it exciting to you?
So, if I'm being honest, which I'm going to be, I didn't watch it until the last 8 minutes when I finally gave in. I was working. I did come across part of Usher's performance with Alicia Keys, and so I did see a little bit of that, and I like that. I'm going to actually watch that rendition on YouTube, but I did not watch the Super Bowl. I have not watched football in 6 years, and the only two games I watched were the two prior to this with Patrick Mahomes, and I was really hoping that Baltimore was going to beat them last week. So that is where I'm at with football.
So you watched the last 8 minutes of overtime?
Yeah, well, the last 8 minutes and then overtime too. Yes.
Okay, very interesting. I imagine the party scene there is going to be outrageous. That facility in Las Vegas is unbelievable.
Oh, I imagine so.
So here we are. You were sharing some of your adventures the last time we spoke.
Yeah,
you've come out of your cocoon, if you will, at your dad's house, then at your mom's house. So what happens next?
So I am now officially, going full force in St. Louis U, and classes, I'm doing better. I can remember my mother at one point seeing me write this 10-page paper and came in and goes, you really are trying to be a student now, huh? And so I thought that was pretty classic. But Topher and I are going to school together. We drive to school every day, talking about the problems of the world, problems of St. Louis U, and our classes and whatnot. And we decide, hey, my mother's going out of town. Why don't we throw a party? When she went out of town, we never threw parties, Mom.
So were those problems that you were discussing specific, or were they
They were
early 20s generalized? Oh, the whole
early
world's got a
20s.
problem.
The whole world is, jacked up, and we just figured this out. And so we decided to create some flyers and promote this party. And it had, kind of directions on how to get to this house. So we pass out the flyers to women only. Some of the guys came up to us and we said, where we're from, if you really are about it, you'll figure out how to get there. So we're not going to keep you out, but we're not inviting you in. Right?
Go ahead.
And it just so happened, as I mentioned, in the neighborhood, there was this influx of kind of gang violence and other things, and just, a group of friends of mine that played basketball regularly probably made some younger generation, or I would say 2 years younger than us, one of which is the younger brother of the teammates on our high school basketball team, and a close friend. And the younger brother and his friends didn't like us very much for whatever reason, because we don't know where it started or how or what, but they ended up wanting to fight quite often. And a lot of times they wanted to fight when they outnumbered somebody. So they jumped on one friend who we told not to go down to the park that day because not enough of us could join him. And they jumped him and his face was all swollen. And we found, a couple of them, and we, rolled up on them and jacked them up, and it just was getting out of hand. And this particular day, the day before the party, it became a big fight with a bunch of us and a bunch of them. And one of my closer friends got injured from behind pretty badly, and he was pissed. And he was like, JD, you're the driver. Go to my house. I'm going to get my strap. We're going to put an end to this now. The rest of us were on board. So I did not push back. And of course, I regret this, but I could hear, as I'm telling this story, I can hear Britney Spears' song, Oops, I Did It Again. And we roll over to where the brother lives, because that's where they mostly hung out with, the younger brother of our guy we played basketball with, who we were close friends with in high school, but not necessarily didn't hang out much outside of high school. And he got out of the car a block away, and we rolled down, and the older brother who we played basketball with and was our friend, and his younger brother were outside. And I turned the car around and I drove up the street and I said, hey, don't do it. He's outside. And sure enough, you hear firing. He hops in the car. He fired about 3 shots, I'm pretty sure, because it was down a hill. They were just, way above them. And we hopped in the car. We go back to my mother's place. Well, within minutes, police show up. He's left. And I get taken down into the station. Of course, my father gets called. And at this point, this is getting ridiculous, right? When he gets me out, they hold me. They can't find any weapons. They can't find anything. The other guy who left was the only one with the weapon. And we roll out. And so I go into the station. They hold me for as long as they can. They threaten me. They try and get me to talk. They see I'm not talking. Eventually, they let me out. My father comes to pick me up. and he is beyond livid at this point.
Right.
So for the first time since I was wee young, before my sisters were old enough to get a whooping, he was physical. And he started punching me in the chest, yelling at me. You think you're tough? You think you're this? Are you effing crazy? What the are you thinking? Do you want to live? Do you want to this? Like just going in. Valid questions. I really was pissed that I allowed myself to be in that situation. But I think that was the most eye-opening for us is we were headed down the wrong path, and this was enough. Like, okay, the first time we kind of knew we shouldn't be involved in those things, but sometimes and don't do better yet. You need a couple of more lumps on your head. And thank goodness nobody was hurt. And what really put an end to even the fighting amongst them, like I know that if we see them now to this day, the younger generation, we're cool. We don't, it's nothing, and it hasn't been since this moment. But a week later, Shondo and I are at the park near our house, and the brother, Emmanuel, who was our friend from school. Meanwhile, we're out of school at this point, obviously. Right. And Emmanuel's ready to fight Shondo. He's like, okay, you want to fight? And Shondo's like, no, I never wanted to fight. None of us ever wanted to fight. You didn't put an end to your little brothers stopping this. But I don't want to fight you, and I don't want to fight them. This whole thing is stupid, and we don't even know what it's about, but you got to cut this shit out. You got to make this stop too. I'll make it stop on my end. You make it stop on your end. And it was great to see. There was another person from our neighborhood that was kind of friends with both parties, and he witnessed it, and he kind of went back and spread, Shondo was peacemaker in this whole thing. And so from that point, we were able to kind of curtail that, and a lot of us woke up like, yo, it's time to do some really other things. Mind you, there's a party going on this night when I get caught up. My dad sends me back to my mother's house, and he drops me off. And Topher and Dedrick, my friends from U City that go to SLU, are outside the house, and they're like, we're going to tell everybody to go home. I'm like, no, the hell you aren't. I need this more than ever before. And sure enough, we have a smashing party. And one of the friends who I mentioned and nobody knows about this, right? Nobody knows what I've been through at the party. Nobody other than my friends from our neighborhood that came. And, Nellie's there. Like all of my closest friends, most of which are on the cover of the book, a lot of them are there. And then some guys from St. Louis U are there, and it's smoking Black and Milds, it's smoking weed, it's drinking, it's having a good time. Definitely more females than males. And one of the closest friends who became a close friend really after this was my first experience with him, was D. Denham, who I mentioned before, who went on to work with me during my Nelly days and all of that. But D. Denham's first experience was at this party with me, and he got drunk as could be. At one point, he was just hugged up against the refrigerator, right? And as time went on, some of Nelly's cousin and his group of friends from the inner city that he grew up with, because Nelly was raised in the inner city, they came through, and these are our close friends. But they come through a little different looking than the college students, right? And so as the night's going on, D. Denham goes, now JD, now D. Denham is from like the county. Now JD, you're a cool dude. If you, I see my people coming, and this might be the riffraff. So if you need me to help you kind of get rid of folks, just let me know. And I leaned into him and I said, D, I appreciate that so much, but they're here to get rid of you, not the other way around. And he was like, what? I said, yeah, I know these guys for years upon years. They're not here. I'm not trying to kick them out. It's time for everybody else to go. And he was like, oh, okay. So, so as time went on, everybody kept asking me, are you going to do that party again? Are you going to do another party again? To the point where now, remember, I'm a super duper senior by the time I graduate, right? 4 years at St. Louis U. In my 4th year, a freshman girl comes up to me and goes, you're the guy that threw that party years ago. Are you going to have another one? And I'm going, wow, how the heck does this still go on? But it was a chill night. I mean, nothing like explosive happened at the party. It just was a beautiful party. And really, St. Louis U is not known for being a party school. So because of that, I get a little bit of a boost for having such a great party at that time. And my mother would not have found out except for 2 things. One, we cleaned up. I mean, it was spotless when she came home. Spotless. And then I hear this scream, Jesse! And I go, what happened? How did she find anything? And she opens up the freezer, and there's an ash about 2 inches long from a Black and Mild in the freezer. So some drunk fool, and she goes, I know this wasn't your friends because they know better than to do something like that. So who'd you have in my house? What was I going to say? She went across the street, talked to the neighbors after that, and they were like, oh, yeah, it was a big party. There was cars parked everywhere. So there goes the neighborhood. After the party, finding out about the party, she finds out about the incident with the police, and I am not in trouble at the same level. They're kind of in this whole, you know what? We tried our best with you. You're either going to get your shit together or you are going to go down a road that we can't stop because this is ridiculous. And so they treated me more like, you know, I have to live with my own consequences. And that was good for me because I really was scared straight at this point. I know the last time I said I was scared straight, but I realized how influential peer pressure can be, how influential peer pressure in that heated moment can be, and how hard it is to stop something when you need to really stop it. And so,
tell me something.
Yes, sir.
We need details about this party. How big was it?
How big? I would say, so it's a house party, right?
Right.
And I would say it's 40 women, 30 guys. You know, right. it wasn't like the movies house parties, but it was about that.
Now, also, music. Clear. We know that there's alcohol, and we know that there was some Black and Mild, some blunts, and some weed. Was there? There was well, there was music, clearly, right?
Yes, for sure.
And
in the family room, which was a converted garage next to the kitchen, and then as you swing around, the living room is right next to where you come in the front foyer. So both of them had speakers governed by the same music system. So the entire bottom floor was the main floor being used for this party. But it was a lot, you know, my mother had a nice deck. There's a jacuzzi in the backyard. I think we got into the jacuzzi later with some of the last of those but that wasn't really part of the party that most of them got to experience.
Now, in your conversations with your friends today, do they bring up the party?
No, so not that one as much as just the fact that when mom left town, we had some nice gatherings. I mean, there were some very nice gatherings.
I hear an underlying tone, and I recognize that you are a gentleman and you won't kiss and tell. But to our very faithful listeners, um, he's got a mischievous look on his face.
Yeah,
I think there's stories and secrets to be kept.
yeah. My parents both went out of town each summer, um, and each time it was a grand old time. Didn't have to be necessarily as big of a party as that, but amongst the friends, it was a place where we could gather and invite people over and do a lot of young 20s, late teens things.
So was that the last time you threw a big party?
That was the last. No, heck no. Um, there was a party so big, but was I in college still? Maybe, but this was we stopped doing college parties, right? Like because my friends really most of them weren't in college, and the more and more people that I really like to associate with were more from the quote unquote streets and whatnot. We didn't like the college crowds; they were kind of prissy and stuck up and everything. And so Topher and I wanted to keep college, and our friends, our friends. But I can remember a night Nelly had gotten into rum 151. Yeah, okay, good. So you already know. And I had no idea. This is actually what made me scared of drinking. So I have a party, about 8 girls invited over, about 8 guys, whatever. At least this is all that I can remember. And I'm drinking one rum for 140, 151, or I think that's what it's called. And I remember saying, this is the best drink I ever had. And then I remember waking up. And when I tell you I had vomit all over my outfit, I had vomit all on the sheets of the bed. I go into the bathroom, there's vomit on the back of the toilet and in the tub. And I go back and I just lay down like my head, I can't take anymore. And another friend comes up to my bedroom door. It's like, yo, can you take me home? And I looked at him. When did you come? And he was like, man, you was talking so much shit last night. And he said, yo, trash talking was like up to here. Well, he was Mike's friend, and Mike, my older brother figure, Shondo's older brother. Like Mike came over, and Mike's an instigator. He loves talking shit and getting other people riled up. So mind you, I'm in there talking, and Mike is pushing every button because he knows me since I was 4 years old. So he is pushing every button of my ego right now. It's like I'm saying I'm gonna be rich, I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna be like all kind of stuff apparently. And yeah, and then all of a sudden Shondo said, you just stopped and you just walked upstairs and we never saw you again. And I went to look for you, and you were hugged up backwards, sitting on the toilet backwards, hugged up on the back of the toilet, and you had vomited in the toilet and just had your head down like that. And I picked you up and put you in the bed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, oh, that's bringing back some memories, my friend. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's that's a lesson in maturity, my friend.
Yeah.
The doctor, because there's that moment when everybody overestimates their capacity for alcohol.
And I didn't drink through high school, didn't smoke any drug, anything, nothing through high school. Got into weed heavily after high school for about 8 years. Drank some, didn't really like being buzzed unless I was trying to, talk to women, and then I had much more confidence in whatever words were going to come out of my mouth at that point. But I didn't like drinking as much, and after 151 night, I was frightened. I was frightened. What could happen? What could I do and not remember and get myself into trouble about? And I never wanted to come close to that blackout feeling again. So I still drank some from time to time at, like, when I got with Nelly's, when his career took off and I would be at industry parties, I would do the drink just so I had one in my hand and nobody would be calling me a square in the industry. But I knew I never, ever wanted to come close to that experience again, because I was too afraid. I did not want to, I didn't want to get in trouble for, I don't know what I did.
Yeah, I get it. That makes perfect sense. We all have to find that moment of when enough is enough and when enough is too much.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you brought back some memories. Yeah,
For the most part, my college was about hanging out with, the Black Student Alliance in the sort of social atmosphere, food court and everything at St. Louis U. And they had ping pong tables, and I grew up with ping pong tables in my basement. So me and Shondo played for hours. We taught each other left-handed as well as right-handed because we got bored. So I would play students, and a lot of them were basketball players, Justin Tatum, Jason's father. I forget some of the other ones' names right now, but basically some of the St. Louis U basketball team, and I would play a lot of them left-handed. There was one other guy, he was from the islands of like Jamaica and whatnot, and he was really good. He would let the ball drop almost to the floor, and you couldn't even see him hit it because it was so low beneath the table, and it would come zipping around with a lot of spin, and he and I were like the two top players and that was kind of my college experience. I remember I was having play in a tournament that they started, and it just so happened that right before the tournament, Topher came. Topher, the security of the school came and got Topher out of class and accused him of stealing someone's book bag at a dorm we never went to visit. It was a white girl that, her bookcase stolen by a tall Black man. Oh. And so we got my father involved, and it just so happened that this hearing amongst the school, whatever, panel came down that day, and they put Topher in a room. This how crazy it was. In the corner of a room, had her peek through the door and identify whether that was him or not. And she said, yeah. And then we had to prove, no, Topher was with me. He doesn't live on campus. He doesn't do this. He doesn't. And it was a mess. And this just happened to be the day of the finals. And I'm in the middle of playing the finals while this is going on with my father and Topher presenting to this panel. And my dad is pissed. And Topher was afraid, like, he's going to get me kicked out of school. He's going off on these people so bad for this. But he didn't do it, right? And so it was, my dad used his eloquent language of his law degree, and he went in. And at the end, they said, okay, we're going to take the evidence and we'll, take your presentation and we'll get back to you. And he came and got me in the middle of the finals of the ping pong tournament and was like, come on, we're going. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to win this one. And yep. And so, fortunately, they did not find enough evidence to hold Topher, but I can remember him being very shook by that experience. One, by being accused, just being a black man being accused, and two, by how Larry went in on them, and Topher felt like he was at risk because Larry made them feel bad, and my dad can do that. Certainly has done that to me on plenty of occasions. So
there's a couple of avenues there that are really resonant. Well, one, the partying, which is a lighter subject, but your friend Topher being accused of something that he didn't do based on a vague description. I've got a personal experience like that one too. And maybe it's not time for that, but
well, it's time for you to start talking. So
all right, so let's talk about that. We're going to jump into the future when you're accused of something that you didn't do. I'm living in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I have a 45-minute commute to Greenfield, which is a suburb of Milwaukee. And it's
how old are you at this time? Like,
oh my gosh, I'm in my 30s. I've got kids.
Okay.
I've got kids, and I'm living in Wisconsin. It's probably 2000. Resident Evil for the GameCube has just come out.
Okay.
And it's launch day. We've killed it in terms of reservations. And the more reservations you get, the more copies you get to the store, the more copies that you get to the store that are, because of their reservations, those are guaranteed sales. A lot of times you'd have people prepay the game, pow, we're rolling. And then as a matter of fact, we've done so well that I end up with a GameCube of my own. I'm geeked.
And so you're working at this place?
Yeah, I'm working at a GameStop.
GameStop, okay.
It's April-ish, I think. But I have a red coat, so this way I can't be incognito because you see the red coat. Right. I'm not doing anything suspicious.
Right.
As I've been there since 8:00 in the morning because that's when the shipment was coming in from Chicago to Wisconsin so that I could have my games for the release at 10:00. When the doors opened, I wanted my customers to be able to go, pow, come get their stuff, and we're going to have a banner day. I haven't left the store all day. It's 5 or 5:30. I've got my bag. I've got my red jacket. My red jacket on, and I got my Pepsi because I like my dark soda. There's a couple of cars at 76th and Edgerton, which is kitty corner from my store. There's a Burger King on the corner, and then there's a McDonald's like on the other side of the street, about 4 or 5 doors down. I don't pay any attention to the cop cars there. I'm like, that's neat. I hop in my car and I take my happy ass on. Exit the parking lot, make the left turn, and I'm about to get on the 76th, and the cop car slides in right behind me. I don't think anything of it. Keep my speed down. Everything's cool. I cross. I'm on. Is it? No. That's Layton Avenue that I'm on, and I've just crossed Layton and 76th, and I'm going west out of town. Lights go on. Multiple cop cars are here, and I'm scratching my head going, what is this? Where are you coming from? And old girl is like, don't give me any grief. Get out of the car. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? I've got cops around me, and I have no idea what I've done. Where are you coming from? I said, the address. And she's like, don't sass me. Where are you coming from? I was like, the GameStop over there. And I just, and she's like, well, she's getting really hostile, and I'm like, what's going on? Well, come to find out, there's a moto photo that was robbed across the street, and the description was a tall black man wearing glasses.
Fit the description.
That's exactly what was said. You fit the description.
Yeah, that's the classic line.
And there are multiple squad cars, and there are dudes with guns out.
Mm-hmm. Because they were robbed, so at gunpoint, supposedly.
Yeah, and so clearly I'm a threat. I'm like, I'm just going home. Let me see your license. So she gets the license, and I said, I'm going home. And so she's starting to interrogate me, and I say, call my store. Call my store. My assistant manager calls up and said, no, he was here from the opening, and he hasn't left the store. She said, I came in at noon. He hasn't left the store. He hasn't been out of my sight for the last 5.5 hours. It can't be him. They still were questioning, let me search your car. I'm like, no. I want to speak to a supervisor. And I said, you have to have more of a description than a tall black man wearing glasses. And they're like, you fit the description. I said, long hair, short hair, light skin, dark skin, dreads, facial, tattoos, anything. I hear what you're saying, but it's not valid. And this is that moment for me where I am minimally unsettled, but there's some trauma here, because when you're staring at guns, you don't have a clue what to do, because your brain is saying fight or flight. You're standing stock still. Multiple people are yelling things at you, and you don't know who to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
So here you are, hands up. Like, can one of you just tell me what to do?
So if I can add to contextualize, the idea of being behind the barrel of a gun is threatening enough. The idea that somebody, even if it's not pointed directly at you at the time, and I don't know if it was or not, but that somebody has guns available at, in your vicinity and can shoot them in a threatening manner. I've been around plenty of people who carry their guns, and I haven't been threatened because I know them and what I'm not posing a threat to them. But when it's a threat and there is guns involved, that's a whole nother level of your body, your mental, everything, your emotional confusion, your racing, it's all of these calculations happening. Mind you, that's just if somebody has a gun. Now we're talking about having the system behind them.
Right.
So they can get away with whatever they do much more than just somebody randomly having a gun and you feeling threatened. So now you're not even, at some point with somebody with a gun, at least they have consequences potential to them if they use it. In this case, what you're talking about, there is no consequences for them, at least in your mind as you're going through this. They're highly unlikely that they have fear of pulling that trigger and what the consequences will be.
And let's amplify this a little further, right? I am a big black man. Yeah. And the only thing that someone has to say is one of two things. He went for something. I thought he had a gun.
Yeah.
I felt threatened.
Yeah.
So when you see, when people say, oh, you should just do what you're told, if multiple people are yelling at you and giving you orders, who am I supposed to pay attention to? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Get your wallet. This is like the most lethal kind of Simon Says that you can think of. Exactly. What order am I supposed to follow?
Right.
Because if I don't follow the right order, two things happen. One, he went for something. He moved. Two, I felt threatened. Three, just like you said, having the system behind you and consequences and repercussions don't necessarily equal what they should.
Right.
I am thankful that my assistant manager was there and said, I haven't taken my eyes off of him since noon.
Right.
So when I see these things on the news, when I see these segments about these circumstances, it's a systemic problem.
Of course.
It's very much a systemic problem. Then you can start to trickle down to the individuals in the system who may use the system inappropriately, but it's a systemic problem. When I hear people say, oh, you should just do what you're told, if you've not had a gun on you,
or several people barking out what you should be told, and why they all have guns, yeah. So
you don't know how you are going to react.
Who and how was it de-escalated at this point for you?
When they confirmed that I had been there, all those cars just, and I'm left there standing alone,
shaken.
Oh, absolutely. I was in tears.
Oh, yeah.
You can be the toughest person that you want to be, but in a moment like that, that adrenaline dump, you cry.
Yeah.
I was scared. When people say I'm scared for my life, this is truth. This is truth. You cannot, it's not something that you want to duplicate. And for people who are run through those sorts of scenarios and they're hardened, they're tough people. They're absolutely tough people. I don't want to be in that position. So it changes you. It absolutely positively changes you. Just because you fit the description, and who knows what tall is. Tall black man wearing glasses. All right. Depends on whose perspective tall is. Someone who's 5'8" may be tall to you, JD.
Absolutely right.
And that's not a joke.
Nope.
But someone who's 5'8" may be tall to you and not tall to me.
It's not a joke, right?
Someone who's 6'7" is tall.
Mm-hmm.
6'5", it's close to me. I don't consider it all that tall.
Right.
But 6'5" and up, that's a tall Mickey Ficky right there.
Right.
Black, we have black folks who are as light as you.
Right.
And black folks who are as dark as the square in same difference, or the triangle in the same part of our logo, right? There's this entire spectrum of black. So now we've got size, color, and the only thing that's definitive is that he wore glasses. Now, had I been wearing contact lenses, that definition was incredibly vague. Incredibly vague. And if you think of something that was in terms of parameters for a search, if you were looking for something, you would never have something that vague.
Mm-hmm.
Here, and we'll go so far as to say this. If there had been a white person and I said it was a white guy, a tall white guy wearing glasses, the first questions that would have been out there was hair color, eye color, was he fair-skinned, was he swarthy? There would have been all kinds of descriptors attached to define what whiteness looks like. Instead, black is a monolithic thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of several terrifying moments in my life. After you have that experience, you recognize that all police officers are not the ones that you were raised with in elementary school. They're not all officer friendly, because these folks were ready to take me out because I was perceived as a threat. And now some people in our listening audience were going to be like, well, you didn't do anything wrong, so why should you have anything to fear? If you can fall into the net of something that broad of a description, then I'm pretty sure a charge can be manufactured to fit you in that description.
Because that's part of the game, is the numbers game of finding someone to match that and go get in trouble. This is why I told these college students, I'm not afraid to go into these areas where you think you're afraid to go into, because there's this news reports of how violent it is in those areas. And you can imagine Black folks would be angry at white folks for how they've been treated this time. So they definitely would want to kill you. No, they want you to get your ass out of there alive and away from there unharmed, and don't come in accusing anybody of anything.
Right.
That is it.
Right. And again, policing philosophy is a little bit different than what we often think it is. Part one, right? White people are valued.
Right.
So when people were saying all lives matter, or hey, when context with Black Lives Matter, well, white lives matter too. Well, we know that. Mm-hmm. We know this, right? If a white person is harmed, the full authority of the police department is deployed in order to solve that crime and bring that criminal to justice. It's less so for people of color. We can look at crimes against Black women. That's not a priority. Latino women, not a priority. When we jump all the way down to indigenous women, not a priority. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's the idea that we know white lives matter. And if we look at, there's two things. One, if we look at solving those crimes, it's important. It's just now that Natalie Holloway's murder was solved and Vandersloot was brought to justice. He happened to be white in the Bahamas. or Dutch descent in the Bahamas, they spent time, energy, resources for years to find him and to get him. We don't see that same level of expenditure in resources towards solving Black crimes or crimes against Black people.
Yeah, where they are the victims. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we don't see that same thing. And certainly not for Indigenous women, certainly not for missing Latinas and missing Asian women. We don't see that same use of resources. And then there's also the other part of that argument, which is the prevention side. Now, prevention of crime is not the same thing as the solution of crime. They're two different things. Prevention means we don't have it happen. Solution is that when it does happen, we solve that crime. More often than not, white people are living in areas where those crimes are prevented in many respects because there's more resources in the area versus in Black areas or a lot of areas where people of color live, the resource allotment and allocation is different as well. Wow. Didn't mean to get into the socioeconomic aspect of that, but those moments are unnerving. They're absolutely unnerving.
How did you get through that?
My former father-in-law was a police officer, and when I explained it to him, because I was sobbing, he said,
"Were you married at the time?"
Oh, I was.
Okay.
I was married at the time, and he said, "Kory, what they did to you, I wouldn't have done." He was former law enforcement, and he said, "I would have apologized the moment that I knew that you were not our guy. I would have apologized and said, terribly sorry about that, and would have progressed. Would have not. I would have tried to leave you with some dignity, and that was meaningful." There's an additional point that comes to that as well. Before I got hostile, I would have probably asked you would have probably told you some of those things. Or if you were the manager of, because I was the manager of this store, I would have looked at you the moment that I knew that. I would have looked at you as a valued member of the community, and I would have said, "What do you know? Is there anything that you might shed on this?" Because now, and I told someone in a follow-up conversation, it was like, why would I be inclined to help in the future? If you had approached me as though I was a member of the community, I would have done everything I could, because if a store gets robbed in my neighborhood and I'm the manager of the store, that means that there's a possible threat that my store could be robbed as well. And the way they looked at me instead of a member of the community as a perpetrator, it changes all the dynamics. You're not part of the community. You don't belong here. And because you don't belong here, I have to treat you as a suspect.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have the insiders and the outsiders. Either you belong to the community or you don't belong to the community. And if you don't belong to the community, what are you doing here? And anything that goes wrong in the community, my eyes are on you first. Yuck. Yuck. As we have moved forward, it's every time that I get stopped by a police officer, I am uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. And it's not as though that trauma dissipates. It never goes away, because you realize, again, you get pulled over for speeding, you're on the side of the road, and all those exact same things apply.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid. I'm fearing for my life. He went for something. Which is now, whenever there's an encounter with the police, signal my intentions, pull over as soon as possible. Stop the car, have as much of that paperwork already ready, grab it, roll down the window, turn off the car, hang the keys out of my fingers. So my both hands out the door, out the window, keys on my finger, driver's license, car registration, proof of insurance. I have all that out there. Why? Because I want the officer to know that I am absolutely positively no threat at all.
Mm-hmm.
My white friends don't have to do that.
I don't. I wait until they walk up to the car and then say, okay, when you ask me for something, I'm going to reach over and grab it. So I get that privilege, and I know we hate using these terms, but until the system doesn't have one race of people valued higher than the other, whether it's economic value or criminalization or whatnot, it's a reality. It's a reality that exists. And if you don't experience it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If you heard it on the news that this is over, if you're listening to your favorite radio, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. If you think, stop complaining. If you would just do better, you could get these loans, you could get these things, you could get this. Doesn't mean that that's not true.
And I've said this before, and I'll probably continue to say this again. I tell this in several of my stories. Part of being Black in America is making white people feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to make the people with the badges and the guns and the handcuffs and the tasers and the tear gas or the mace and the baton comfortable so that I am not a threat. Because if I don't do that, taser, billy club, gun, handcuffs, all those things, strikes, whatever, I have to make them feel comfortable. Again, I am a big Black man. And for some people, just my presence is enough to be triggered. I don't need to be anything other than big and Black for someone to be threatened. And because of the way I speak, I can be considered uppity. And I don't know my place. Well, how do we take somebody down? We put a couple knots upside his head with a billy club. Well, what was that for? Now you're talking out of line. Well, we need to subdue you. And now, for some people in our listening audience, this may sound like it's absolutely crazy. I can guarantee you that it is not. And if it is not fully from my own lived experience, there are plenty of stories where an escalation of this sort has happened because.
And I know for some it is difficult, and we're going to wrap this up, to grasp, if you haven't experienced this, that this isn't being blown out of proportion. It's also hard to realize that there were serial killers, that there were war criminals, that there are people that do massive, destructive, violent things, right? And it happens. It really does. Not that we should live in fear of those. We can be afraid for sure and keep our head on a swivel, as you talked about earlier. But to deny somebody's experience because you don't believe that people are like that because you're not like that, it's honorable not to be like that. It's not honorable to diss somebody else because they've have a different lived experience.
Very true.
That's my closing points for this episode.
Really quickly, these are stories that are not unique. I'm fairly certain that if one asks among one's legitimate Black friends, and I mean that not the acquaintance of the guy that you may see at the 7E coming and going. No, we're talking about someone with whom you have a close personal friendship. And if you don't have Black people in your close personal friendships, then check yourself, because you're not qualified to say that those stories don't happen. Nearly every person of color, every Black person, and I can only speak for the Black folks right now, almost every Black person has an experience where a traffic stop is incredibly uncomfortable to the point of an escalation that is terrifying. And I use the word terror because that's what it is. When you know, again, as JD pointed out, the good doctor pointed out, that there is an agent of the system that can move throughout society and use the power of that system without consequences and repercussions, that's absolutely scary. And when you are the focal point of that kind of power, that is terrifying.
Yeah. I will share my stories next time.
JD, we've got to say thank you to some people. Oh my goodness. We forgot.
We didn't forget. We were saving the best for last. We want to thank VPR, DJ FMI, and Kiana the Goddess for all of their support. We appreciate, if you're not checking them out, their guests are amazing. I want to get a hold of the last guest that was the poet, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but it's the episode after ours, because our listeners are all going to go and check out our episode. Got to thank them. We appreciate everything that they do. Yeah. Please check us out on samedifference.life and email us at samedifferencebroadcast@gmail.com. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to our stories and our thoughts, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the future.
JD, you said it so well and you summed it up. I'm going to let you say good night.
Good night. Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.